Okay, there you go. Brilliant. I'm in. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for those of you who attended this morning and to all the staff for the session this morning. Welcome to those who've just arrived, and hopefully everyone managed to get some sort of nice lunch, and a really big thanks for the lunch. It was delicious, so that's good. I thought it'd be helpful just to run around the room introducing ourselves so that everybody knows who each other is. There's some new faces here today and such like, and then we'll get into the sort of depth of the meeting first. So my name's Simon Curry. I'm a portfolio holder on Medway Council. My portfolio holding covers strategic regeneration and transport issues and frontline services and such like. So, and I've been on the board for about 18 months now, I think, something like that. And I was vice chair to Keith. And just before we start, I just want to get, Keith mentions it in the annual report, but also he's a couple of times. Just wanted to say again, we've said it before, a huge thanks to him for all his contribution over the years to this board and to regional transport generally for all of us. We are better off as a result of the work that he put in. So I just wanted to make that from the start. So I'll go around the table to my right.
Carolyn Mackenzie, I'm Director for Environment and Planning at Surrey County Council and standing in for Matt.
Mendes, Head of Placements and Strategy, Surrey County Council.
Joe Radcliffe, Transport Strategy Manager at King County Council, officer here supporting.
I'm Spencer Dixon. I'm the Deputy Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport at King County Council.
Yeah, I'm Councillor Trevor Newton. I'm the Cabinet Member for Transport and City Infrastructure and Environment Health.
Steve Forsberg, I'm the Executive Member for Highways and Passenger Transport at Hampshire County Council, and also Chair, if I may, just declare a personal interest because we're discussing EV charging a bit later, and my own business is one of the EV charge point operators in rapid charging, so it's a non-prejudicial personal interest.
Thank you. I'm Frank Baxter. I'm from Hampshire County Council.
My name is Peter Candlish. I'm the Cabinet Member for Transport at Portsmouth City Council.
Felicity Tibbury, Assistant Director at Portsmouth City Council.
Hi, Alice Darley at National Highways, a Regional Strategy Lead.
Darryl Hemmings, Transport Planning and Policy Manager at West Sussex County Council.
Erica Woodhurst-Truman, I'm the Cabinet Member for Highways and Transport at West Sussex.
I'm John Wheeler, I'm Team Manager for Infrastructure Planning and Place at East Sussex.
Pete Morley, deputising for Councillor Woolley from East Sussex County Council.
Afternoon, everybody. Dan Taylor from the Department for Transport. I head our regional engagement team for London East and the South East, and Transport for South East sponsor within the department.
Furness from Surrey County Council, John Ennis from Reading, Julie Jones Evans is not here, from the Isle of Wight, Vince Lucas, Director, VA Rail, Councillor Matt Borton from the District and Borough Representative, and Shamal Ratnanyaka and Mark Potter. Apologies. Have all sent their apologies on that. Thank you very much. Just mentioning also that, that do introduce yourselves when you speak, but also that this is a live streamed meeting, so if you it is available to watch on YouTube afterwards if anyone wants to catch up on stuff they might have missed. Okay, moving on to item 2 on the agenda, which is minutes from the previous meeting. Those have been circulated. Thank the board meeting members from the 19th of March, and I'm looking for the approval of those minutes. There was no actions rising from those minutes. So are those who were present on the 19th happy that they are the minutes are accurate from the last meeting? No comments? Okay, so I'll take that as read. Thank you very much. We've had one declaration of interest. Thank you from Steve. Any other declarations of interest? No? No others? Great, thank you very much. And we've got no statements from the public on item 4. So moving on to item 5, our governance item, and I'll hand over to Rupert for this.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is sort of one of those moments in the year where at our AGM we elect a chair, vice chair, chairman of Audit Governance Committee, and people nominated from organisations onto the Transport for South East Board. I preside over this section, which is for the election of the chairman, and then once the chairman is elected, the rest of this item will pass back to the pass to the chairman to continue with. In essence, for now, I'm seeking nominations for the role of chairman for the ensuing year. Do I have a nomination? Councillor Candlish?
Peter Candlish, Portsmouth City Council. I'm happy to propose Councillor Simon Curry to step up and become the chair of this group.
And do I have a seconder? A number of seconders. Councillor Mewson. And those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Councillor Curry, may I be the first to congratulate you on your election to chair for the coming year. Over to you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, colleagues, for what basically we'll how it worked out over the year. There's a lot of challenges this year, but I am grateful for that. Oh, use this instead. Is that working? It's better. So I'm using a microphone by hand now, so see how we get on. So just to say that it's a real privilege to be taking on this role, and I've been working with Transport for the South East for a little while now, and it has been a real privilege to work with the team, with Rupert and the officers and Sarah and the rest on the work they've been doing. But we've got some huge challenges ahead of us. And what we need to do, and I think it was emphasised at our induction session this morning, about that collaboration, bringing together the political leaders from across the South East in order to ensure that we give a common voice to the government, but not just to the government, but to the people who live here, and in particular to potential investors and business community as well, that we want to provide the most comprehensive and most built up transport network possible for what we want to try and achieve in terms of the economy, our environment, and most especially for the people in our community. I was at a meeting last week of the Medway Youth Forum, and it was a whole bunch of teenagers all in the room asking me questions about environmental issues and transport. One of them who was who asking questions were talking about buses. They don't really want to be driving anymore if they can avoid it. It's expensive, it's complicated, it's too much hassle for teenagers, all that kind of stuff. But they really do want to be able to get on a bus, and it's cheap and they want to tap their phone. They don't want to have to buy a ticket, all that kind of stuff, all that messaging coming from that next generation. And that's what sustainable development is all about, thinking about that next generation. What can we do now that makes it better for them for the future? And that's kind of the work that we're doing. And that strong message about what the young people are looking for is what we want to try and deliver from the work we're doing around this table. It's so important. I just wanted to mention that little story about meeting lots of teenagers in a room, which is quite challenging, as I'm sure you all know. We need to keep the government in sight of what we're trying to do, make it very clear and concise. This is what we've got in the southeast. We are the gateway to Europe. We are a massive economy in our own right. We have our challenges. We have our deprivation, just the same as the north of England, which I like too. I've got family up there. But we do need to get that investment from government. So we need to make that message atop. I'm pleased that the Secretary of State has responded positively to the letter that Keith sent to them just before he stepped down. And once the new Prime Minister is confirmed this week, presumably, I intend to write to the Secretary of State now that I'm the chair of this group in order to get an early meeting with them to get our message across as much as possible. We need to really make that clear, that message about funding. I mean, that's the key thing. We've seen that already from our induction thing, and you've seen it from the papers today. The fact that we will not have Department for Transport funding next year is a real massive challenge, and we need to overcome that challenge. And there's a lot of work done by the team behind the scenes to get to where we are now with that process, and we'll be taking it forward in October as well. So there's a lot of issues around that we need to understand. Understanding all the finance pressures that are on our public finances generally, as all councillors, we know that, but the transport issues are key to how we make sure that development and growth happens in the southeast. So I want to continue that work of collaborative working, partnership working with local authority partners, business, the wider transport sector, getting that regeneration that we need in the southeast. So I'll stop there. I could talk more about it, but so thank you very much for placing your confidence in me. Moving on to other governance issues now. I want to get the vice chair role of this board in place, and I would like to nominate Peter Candlish as that person. So is there a seconder for that? I've got a couple of people. Steve, thank you very much for that. Any, shall we have a show of hands? Is everybody happy with that? Brilliant, thank you very much. We have a vice chair. We now move on to the nominations following this to co-opt people on. 2 people nominated collectively to represent business.
Yeah, so I think Daniel.
Are colleagues happy with that? Yep. Peter.
I was going to say yes before he changes his mind, so yes.
Okay, thanks very much. Somebody to represent the national parks and other protected landscape designations.
So, Chairman, if I may, we had a conversation about this at the senior officer group. I was advised that protected landscapes have come together and they collectively believe that the South Downs National Park can represent them. Apparently there's capacity issues within others, but we confirm that up at the end of the meeting with them. I think the important thing is for you to agree there is a place allocated on this board to a representative from protected landscapes.
Great. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. And then 2 other particular roles within the board, a person nominated by the district and borough authorities, and also a representative from National Highways, Network Rail and Transport for London. Are we happy with those representatives on the board as well? Agreed. Thank you very much. We also need to sort out the business advisory group role and the voting rights of that, and nominated representatives. So are we happy that the business advisory group has voting rights on the board as well? Yep, agreed. Thank you very much. And now we just need to select a chairman of our Audit and Governance Committee and agree the membership of that committee. Matt Furness from Surrey County Council has put his name forward. I would like to nominate him. Is there anyone else who'd be interested in being the chair of that group? Matt's not here today, but I think he's happy in absence to be selected. Would everybody be happy with that then? Okay, thank you very much. And membership of the committee for the next year. We're looking for volunteers to step on.
Yes, we would want to know from members, it looks like Trevor's keen, if we need membership onto the Audit and Governance Committee.
Anybody else? Anybody else at this stage? Yeah, so the business representatives are happy for that. All right. Yes, please.
Just work on that. Just say, I was on it previously, very keen to continue, and I think it's really constructive subcommittee of this group, and I'll certainly encourage people new to this TFSC to think about it, because I think it was really, really valuable, getting into detail and stepping through. I thought it was very constructive, so I recommend it to you.
Okay, so we've got Erica from West Sussex. Is happy to be on that. Anybody else? Have a think and come back and let us know over the next couple of weeks if you feel that you could step up for that. Be more than welcome.
Is it worth sharing the terms of reference?
Yes. Yep. We'll make sure that happens. Great. Okay, and just one other issue on the governance is about making sure that we've all completed our register of interest forms. I think most of us have, but don't forget to do that when you get the chance. Moving on to item 6, the accountable body status. I'll pass over to Rupert again.
Yeah, thank you. Are we with the sound? Thank you. So, a paper in front of you, members, seeks to change the accountable body for Transport for the South East. So, we've had, crikey, it's like everybody piling in. We had a conversation about this at previous board meetings. So, we know that with the coming of the strategic authorities through devolution, that in time, East Sussex County Council, which is the current accountable body for the staff of TFSC, will cease to be a local transport authority, and it makes sense now to make provision for the accountable body to change. I have had some initial conversations with the Sussex and Brighton Strategic Authority, and subject to their board agreeing, the accountable body for Transport for the South East can be the Sussex and Brighton Strategic Authority. I should stress that doesn't change anything in terms of the relationship between the board members and our activities. This is purely a hosting mechanism in the way that many local authorities often do. You know, they host bodies for the purposes of pay, terms and conditions, policies around finance and HR and stuff like that. So it is taking that aspect and sitting it with the Sussex and Brighton Strategic Authority, subject to your agreement here and subject to their agreement. And that recognises that in time, the local transport authorities that exist at the moment will cease to exist at some point in the future, and that local transport authorities will sit within the preserve of strategic authorities. So that is the essence of the paper. So it's here today to seek your agreement to that transition. That will involve the 2P transfer of staff from the Sussex County Council, who are the current accountable body, to the Sussex and Brighton Strategic Authority. That is a relatively straightforward process under these circumstances, because nothing changes in terms of those staff. It is just a change to the hosting authority. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Keith, and that's really helpful. I certainly support the proposal, particularly from the administrative and operational perspective, from that thing. It's really perhaps a clarification or check in terms of the membership of the board here, in terms of those members in constituents, unitary authorities within strategic authorities. We continue as members within this board. And as a separate matter, I just want to check that the administrative go to the Sussex Strategic, but whilst we as Unitary remain as members, at least for the interim period.
So I think that is something that over time you'll want to have a discussion about, because where strategic authorities are formed, so that's Hampshire and Solent and Sussex and Brighton, the local transport authority powers run concurrently for a period of time, but there will come a moment where the strategic authority remains the outstanding local transport authority, and then the unitary authorities around it remain the highway authority. You have raised at previous board meetings how highway authorities are represented around this table, and I think that is a discussion that needs to be had here. In the same way that we have had borough and district representation, you will want to think about how you want to have highway authorities represented, because they still have an important role to play in relation to transport, and they still have a relationship with the strategic authorities, even though it is the strategic authorities that will be the LTA. So I think that is a discussion you will need to have. It's not urgent, it doesn't need to happen now, because at the moment those powers run concurrently, but you will probably want to have it at your October or December board meeting.
Any other comments on that? So we have 3 recommendations on that. So agree in principle that the accountable body for TSFE should transfer as described. Note that the proposed transfer is expected to be a straightforward change in hosting arrangements under the 2P regulations. And then finally, to authorise the TFSE Chief Officer in consultation with the Chair of the Partnership Board to work with East Sussex and the Sussex and Brighton Strategic Authority to complete the detailed implementation arrangements. And we'll report back to the board at the next meeting. Is everybody happy with those recommendations? Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 7, and we're getting into sort of the meat of the meeting now, having done a lot of the sort of housekeeping work. This is about our future funding model, and it's complex stuff, and there are a lot of issues around this, as we know. So I'll hand over now to Rupert to go into that.
Thank you, Chairman. So members, those members that were members before Christmas are aware that the DFT had cut the level of funding to subnational transport bodies across the country, and asked us to bring forward proposals to function sustainably once that funding ceased. And part of our business plan to the DFT at the time was to consider how we develop effectively a subscription model for Transport for the South East. And in essence, this comprises a core contribution from constituent authorities. So as you know, as constituent authorities, you already contribute an amount to the running of Transport for the South East. And we have had the benefit of a Department for Transport grant in previous years. As part of that business plan, we recognise that the core contribution, i.e. providing the support that we detailed to you when we were having the induction conversation about providing evidence to enable you to develop your business cases. But on top of that, there are services that we can provide that you may wish to buy into, and that is the subscription-based model. So as you know, we've operated that mixed funding model with core contributions and DFT grant. That is not an option for us going forward. I say that because my glass is always half full, and there may well be a change in government that might mean the board wishes to have a further conversation in the way the chair has outlined earlier with the Secretary of State about future SGB funding. But for the time being, we recognise that we will need to develop a subscription model, and this is in essence what the paper is describing. There are a number of services as TFSE has matured into the organisation it is, particularly around analytical work and modelling work and data analysis and insight, that enables us, we believe, to offer a really comprehensive subscription model should local transport authorities wish to buy into it. So we are currently doing a bit of work looking at what evidence there is around demand for that kind of service, where it might go in terms of future under a subscription approach. We're also looking at Transport for the North's offer, because that provides quite an interesting base subscription model for us to examine, and we're particularly looking at how the Centre of Excellence can support you as a primary access point for services. Our intention is to bring back some further detailed work to you at your October board meeting, but we were keen that you understood that that work is going ahead, and that we'll bring back that detailed proposal for you at your October board meeting. So very much this is an update report, but a crucial update report, I think, in terms of the sustainable funding for Transport for the South East, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you might have.
Has anyone got any comments or questions at the moment? I've got one from Peter and then Daniel.
My one is just a point of clarification, really. In the recommendation number 1, it talks about a core contribution and subscription model, but we are generally talking about a subscription model. Is the model that's likely to come back in October going to have those two elements? And if it is, then the first part of that element, building on the commentary about devolution, for example, is the expectation that that will be coming in the longer run from a combined mayoral authority.
So, Chairman, if I may, what Councillor Candish has highlighted is some of the challenges around the funding decision and when it was made. There is a lot of turmoil and a lot of change with LGR and devolution that makes development of a sustainable funding model quite challenging. So the shorthand answer to that is yes, it will come back highlighting the core element. And so, as you know, as authorities, you pay a core component that nets up to $498,000 a year. And that's made up of currently $58,000 for a county authority and $30,000 for a unitary authority. I should add that those figures haven't changed since 2017, so they've not been inflated because, you know, frankly, you are all in difficult financial circumstances. That local contribution had enabled us historically to lever in DFT funding and DFT grant. With that going, we still believe we can offer you a core service that will include some of the things that you have enjoyed to date. But there are some services, by virtue of the amount of money that the DFT has invested and allowed us to develop in terms of analytical framework, there are some elements of work that we believe are a subscription that, to put frankly, you should pay more if you want to access it. That's where we'll be heading. There does come a reality, though, and this will be very important in terms of decisions in October and as we go into budget setting around December time, that the local authority contribution continues. That is vital to both enable a core service and therefore then to enable a subscription service. And I would ask members to think about, given the level of core contribution hasn't been uplifted for effectively a decade, what opportunities there are to increase the core level of funding to support a far better, far stronger core offer and subsequent subscription offer. Meanwhile, I think, as the Chairman has indicated, we do need to continue and further those conversations with the Department for Transport. You know, I recognise that the funding situation is difficult for government at the moment for the reasons we spoke about during the induction. But the South East does not want to be left behind. We've spoken about some of the investment that's required to enable the region to punch above its weight. As an STB, that collective voice, that collective political voice to government is crucial. And so we'll want to make that case clear again to the DFT.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Daniel, and then I've got Steve, and then Trevor.
So I was going to make the same point. Thank you for answering that. I would say that from my observation, Rupert runs a very lean ship already. My concern would be if that core contribution falls too low, you won't have critical mass, and the whole thing will collapse to our detriment. So, statement rather than question.
Thanks for that.
Thank you, Chair. My point goes back to almost a previous discussion in terms of the strategic authority, the combined county authority, because whatever we agree will have a significant impact on them. And I don't know if our funding model proposed accommodates that. That's probably a subsequent discussion, but also to make sure that it might be appropriate to invite the chair of the combined authority for ourselves, for Surrey, etc., to get involved so that they can contribute.
So I think you raise a really important point. And if I might just sort of speculate on how what that might look like. So, as you rightly point out, those strategic authorities are formed. So if I take the Hampshire and Solent Strategic Authority, that consists of 4 players, 4 local transport authorities, that at some point, the powers that are currently concurrent will drop away from the existing local transport authorities and rest solely with the Hampshire and Solent Strategic Authority. Part of this comes back to Councillor Mewton's question about, well, what is the role for highways authorities on the board? And that is something that we will need to address, and you'll have to have a conversation here. But it does mean that the local contribution to Transport for the South East could, in future, come from the strategic authority rather than the 4 component bodies or the 4 constituent authorities. And you can apply the same argument to the Sussex and Brighton. Now, I haven't yet had those conversations with those strategic authorities, partly because Hampshire's only just formed, relatively, and Sussex is not that far behind. But I am talking to both Sussex and Brighton, and I am hoping to meet with Ruth Adams from Hampshire and Solent shortly to have exactly those conversations. But I think, and if Dan had legs long enough, I have no doubt he'd be kicking me under the table. But the point for me is that funding changes that the DFT have had to make come at an unfortunate time, given all the changes that we are experiencing as local authorities.
Thank you. Trevor?
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to reference to the Transport for the North, in implying that there's a subscription model or core plus subscription model in the North that perhaps works well for them. And I just wanted to inform our understanding when we do discuss this at a later meeting. Can we get some more background and be briefed about how that does work and why it works, and perhaps some of the things that viability of that, whether it could be applicable in this region or whether it wouldn't work so well. So, yeah, just a briefing to understand that, so we can inform our discussion if that's a model that might be proposed.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the aspects of work that we're looking at to develop a subscription model is understanding what's out there at the minute. Transport for the North has operated this sort of, you can buy a package in effect from them. We'll bring that in so that becomes part of the pool of evidence to enable you to make a decision on what a subscription model looks like. So, long way of saying yes, absolutely.
Thanks so much. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, just on that point there, really, I think that's, I mean, obviously from placing a business hat on, if you like, when thinking about this, is about that agility and flexibility about how we approach the future. We need to be in that place where we can chop and change our approach, if you like. The business plan, we'll get into that in detail shortly, and also looking at the annual report. Those are our prospectuses, is that the right word? Prospecti? I don't know which one it is, for the future, for what we show to anyone who wants to engage with us, to bring them in and say, here's a package that's on offer, or here's a core area of funding which you really need from you at the moment, that kind of thing. And we have to be flexible as we go forward in order to achieve the sort of long-term plans that we want to put in place. So it's about that agility in business terms that we want to have. Anything else on this agenda? I noticed that we've lost our IT over here completely. Is it?
I might just give my colleagues this laptop, which seems to be...
Yeah. Any other issues on this particular item at the moment then? Okay, colleagues, just about noting 2 points then for recommendation. The work underway to develop the future core contribution and subscription model, and note that a detailed proposal will be brought to the October meeting for consideration and agreement. Is that everybody happy with that? Thank you very much.
We need to bring Daniel's item up the bag.
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you for reminding. And I've just been reminded that we were going to bring your item up, and I forgot about that. So shall we move on to the Business Advisory Group item now, if you're happy with that?
I'll keep it very brief, and thank you for being flexible. For those that aren't fully aware, that the Business Advisory Group was set up about a year and a half ago, I think, to try and channel the efforts on behalf of business into TFSE. Vince and I, for those that don't know, were non-exec members of the boards of 2 of the local enterprise partnerships and seconded on to TFSE with those hats on. When the LEPs were disbanded, we were asked to stay on, or we stayed on. Somehow it happened. And the key thing that we're trying to do is make sure that there is a business voice, and we feed business voices into this. The simplest mechanism for doing that efficiently has proven to be through the Business Summit. We ran the first one last year, very successful. There was supposed to be one this summer, but because of elections and all the change here, it made sense to defer that slightly potentially till autumn. So a request that I can have conversations, or Vince and I will have conversations with you about how you want to use that summit. James and Rupert and I, Rupert doesn't know this, are already going to have a meeting very shortly to discuss that very thing. But the point is that it is a very efficient way of getting for you to get insights on what business needs from transport or with transport, and the many kind of connections that are made strategically and in terms of mobility. So any thoughts, please channel them my way, but I'll be making sure that Vince and I come and pick your brains at some point over the coming couple of months. Is there anything else I need to say, Rupert or Simon?
You haven't done yourself justice, actually, Daniel. Daniel is also a non-exec with the Office of Road and Rail Regulator, and has run businesses in your own right,
yes.
As has Vince, who is a director of VA Rail.
Yep.
So not only do these 2 characters bring their expertise in relation to transport, but they are both operated as businesses with their own right, and there is an absolute, and I've seen it firsthand, a willingness from Daniel and Vince to make sure board members are involved and feeding in how best to represent businesses, be the multinationals that operate within our geography, through to the small to medium enterprises that make up large parts of our geography. And so the offer is there from Daniel. Please do make contact either through me and Jamie and the team, or direct to Daniel and Vince.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm just worth saying then that neither of us have a vested interest in anything really, other than the success of the region as a whole. So we really have a bit of a passion to make sure that this initiative really works well.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to say from a general point as well, we talked about our funding model. The role of the Business Advisory Group lies at the very heart of that in so many different areas. So your engagement with all of that is crucial to how we take things forward. Anything else on that? Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item... What else am I losing my track now? Business plan. That's where we are now. Oh, no, sorry, it's the annual report. That's it. Yeah. Sorry, moving on to the annual report. I'll get better at this as time goes by, I promise. So moving on to the annual report, and I'll pass over to Ruben.
Thank you. So I'm coming to the board today seeking your sign off to the annual report, which we will publish on our website. The annual report is a look back over 25-26, and I hope you'll recognise that it represents and presents Transport for the South East as that mature strategic body. It's been functioning now for a few years, and I hope the annual report gives you the sort of evidence, if you like, and gives the reader the evidence that we continue to provide value through that regional advocacy, through the shared evidence base that we spoke about at length before lunch, the scheme development support, and of course that centre of excellence being that sort of shop window that can provide support to our local transport authority colleagues. This is, of course, despite uncertainty over future funding and devolution and local government reorganisation. And as I mentioned earlier, hopefully this annual report demonstrates the sort of continuity that Transport for the South East can provide during these periods of change, despite the challenged financial environment. I got key messages within that annual report. I really want to emphasise the refreshed strategic investment plan. This is your view of the world. These are your priorities that are evidenced. The Secretary of State will take account of that strategic investment plan in setting policy and investment decisions. So it's a really significant document, and read in conjunction with the transport strategy, which you approved earlier, provides a really strong evidence-based narrative for transport in the South East. You'll notice the annual report gives significant focus to the Centre of Excellence, but particularly the rail and the freight and the electric vehicle work programmes, and particularly how Transport for the South East's role in influencing national policy and investment decisions is really coming to the fore. It also demonstrates, I think, that Transport for the South East is more than a strategic body. It has provided practical advice and support to member authorities through the Centre of Excellence. So I hope you find the board, the annual report, a read that reflects your experience over the last year. And for those board members that are new to Transport for the South East, I hope it gives you a good snapshot of what has taken place. So essentially, I'm seeking your agreement for us to approve, to publish the annual report on the website, and look forward to having any questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Rupert. Any questions on the annual report? I just think, again, an extra sort of layer of thinking, which we've all got sort of in our minds, is about that collaboration. One of the things that comes from that report is how important it is. I mean, we think about the commonality of issues that we have. Kent and ourselves in Medway have got the Lower Thames crossing heading our way very fast. We will have to work together very closely to manage to mitigate the impacts that that's going to have on our communities. Equally, everyone who's around the room who's got a big port in their area is talking the same language about ports and how we manage the access to our ports and such like. With similar issues around delivery of EV charging, we're all trying to do that. And those commonality of issues and problems that we all share, this is the venue, this is the place, this is the sort of space where we can discuss and get those things sorted. So that collaboration, that partnership between us as local authorities is a key part of the delivery of that annual report that you can see in there. And I think take it into the sort of how that links to government and the private sector as well. We've got that in our minds too. So thank you very much for the report. Is everybody happy with that to go through? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9 is the business plan. Pass again to Rupert.
Thank you, Chairman. So business plan for the year that we're in for 26-27. You'll recall you approved a draft version of this back in December. This was a submission that went up to the Department for Transport to secure the 1.5 million transition funding. And at the time, that contained, frankly, quite a lot of information, some sensitive information in relation to staffing and the like, because we were putting options in front of you. Now we have that 1.5 million. This is in effect a sort of almost a transition plan rather than a traditional business plan. So it reflects that 1.5 million pounds worth of transition funding. And the way the business plan is structured, it's designed to preserve Transport for the South East's most valuable functions, if you like, so that to enable us to work on that funding and financing model that we spoke about in a previous agenda item. So the plan recognises there are still quite some challenges around east-west connectivity, weak orbital connectivity, freight bottlenecks, infrastructure maintenance pressures, resilience challenges, and socio-economic disadvantage. And it also recognises that dedicated DFT funding for STB, for subnational transport bodies, ends in March next year. And that's what drove the business plan to enable us to evolve into a more, to evolve a more sustainable funding option. And as we touched upon during the induction, The future organisation, the business plan is built around those sort of three core functions. So the one around the single voice, the regional advocacy, one around regional evidence base, and the third around the centre of excellence. Within that is some technical work, and I suppose the most significant technical work streams are around rail, around evidence and modelling, freight, EV infrastructure, and the funding and financing. The proposed budget for 26-27, detailed in the business plan, is 2.94 million. That includes the DFT transition funding of 1.5 million. We do carry a reserve, and you will recall that the DFT allowed us to carry a reserve in the event of wind-up. So that is contained. There's a little bit more detail in the finance papers a bit later on. So this is really a regularisation of the business plan in draft that you saw in December. And again, this enables this to be put on our website once you agree it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any comments on the business plan? I've got Dan.
Did you say rural? Rural. Yes, embedded.
Yeah, embedded. So there is an intention to do some strategic work on the rules. Oh, is that not working? Hello. My best radio voice. So are the rural strategies going to be, is there a plan to do some strategic work on rural transport, for example?
So we're quite fortunate that Transport for the East, Transport East, have secured some DFT grant actually for rural transport, and they are trying to think of the best way to explain. They're the sort of leading STB when it comes to rural transport issues, because the Suffolk, Norfolk, and Essex rural connectivity is quite complicated and challenged, and they provide quite a lot of evidence that we tuck into as well to incorporate within our technical work and transport strategy work. So we embed rural activities using their learning, but we've also identified challenges around the sort of first mile, last mile, so getting people in rural communities to transport hubs. So you'll notice within the strategic investment plan, we identify sort of transport hub areas so that you can bring rural communities to a hub that provides sort of core strategic transport services. What I would say, though, is that Transport for the South East is generally a strategic transport body, and the key is providing some of the evidence to support our local transport authorities who grapple with the sort of rural challenges on a day-to-day basis. But the stuff that Transport East are developing and involved in, we can tap into that and get that through the Centre of Excellence into our local transport authorities.
Great, so that's a good example of how the majority of the work is being done by someone else and we're just nuancing it for our own purposes, which is great. I suppose I was prompted to ask the question because on the page 14, the budget and expenditure page, it doesn't leap out at me where that work might be covered.
Fair point. Yeah. I think because we embed it, in the same way that we don't single out big metropolitan areas, I suppose. But if that's something that you wish us to incorporate, we can put something specific in about.
I suppose that narrative that you just gave doesn't necessarily leap out at me, but that may be because I haven't read it in the minute detail I should do. And if it's there and it's planned, then I'm happy. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other comments? Anyone? Okay. In that case, are people happy to go with the recommendation that we approve the Transport South East updated business plan for 26-27? Everybody happy? Good. Thank you very much. Moving on now. This is moving into some very technically complicated parts. I did read all this, and it's hard work, but it was well worth it. The analytical framework. So Joshua is going to pick up on this one for us.
Hi everyone. For those of you members we haven't met before, I'm Joshua Jiao. I'm the analysis manager at Transport for the Southeast. Look after the development of the analytical framework. So as the chair mentioned, this is a fairly technical part, so I have a few slides prepared, just help you to go through some of the work and the change of our plans this time. So I think before talking about the change of the plan, it's probably worth just mentioning how we get to where we are at the moment. So the original analytical framework developed in 2023 actually, and the current roadmap or plan, if you like, was approved in May 2024. And so far, everything funded by DFT's funding in terms of the development of analytical framework. I think don't need me to say any more on the change of the funding situation and what that happened actually to TFC is we have this 1 year window to develop the analytical framework to a stage that can be used as services rather than still in the development stage. And what that meaning is that from program point of view, we have to shorten from 3 years to 2 years, and with 1 year already passed, which is last year. And then we have this this year to basically develop the rest of the components in the framework, if you like. So I guess it's not surprising we need to do a bit of a prioritization in terms of the components we need to develop and the features we need to get ready. So one of the key criteria or objectives in this prioritization is what does LTA need. So we developed by talking to all the officers, and some of sitting here has been involved in those discussions in terms of what kind of a use case from a local transport authority point of view, what you really wanted from the analytical framework. And also previously, because it's predominantly, it's basically everything is funded by DFT, so we didn't need to talk too much about the governance structure. But now, since this change of mechanism, and we do need to look back on how the governance looks like in the future analytical framework. So before actually talking about the plan or the framework itself, I think it's worth just dwelling on what we have achieved in the past couple of years so far. So since 2025, we have received 32 requests from basically everyone in this room, your authorities, and this is including requests on data as well as using the models and the tools to carry out some of the analysis. And worth noting, that number was when the paper was drafted, and the number now already increased to 36 now. So just over the last month or so, we have 4 more requests coming. And as mentioned, the requests coming from all 16 authorities, and as well as DFT and the National Highways. So that's the 18 different organizations. I think Sarah earlier mentioned the regional travel survey, which is the travel survey we carried out in 2024, later 2024, early 2025. We collected nearly 7,000 samples, and in order to understand not only how people traveled and why they traveled, and also how this has changed or evolved since COVID. One of the key platform we and the local technical officers discussing the analytical challenges and kind of sharing knowledge is a modeling and appraisal forum. we have 5 happened, but again, this is the number when we drafted this paper, and actually we have had another one last week to discuss the the plan, the detailed plan of this year's analytical framework development, and we received quite a lot of useful feedback from officers in terms of how they found it useful and what they would like to see from the framework in this year's development. I'm not going to read out the full list of the projects we have developed or delivered so far, but just emphasize on some of early point. This economy of scale we delivered. One of the very useful example is BT network data. So if individual of you going out to procure this data, it could cost something between 40K to 80K, depends on your population scale. But we managed to procure this at a regional level, and we managed to agree with BT. We share the data freely with everyone, all the partners in this region. So that's give you some kind of a very brief idea on why this is more efficient, cost efficient to be done at a regional level. Since there are many new members in this room, I thought it might be worth just very briefly say what is the analytical framework. So the broader vision is we have a coordinated, high-level, and accessible to everyone analytical system sitting at the regional level. And the kind of a key purpose really is to while sharing this consistent evidence base within the region, also try to help each LTAs to build up your own capability and capacity as well. So from slightly more technical term, the analytical framework, it's 4 layers of data, tools, and models structured around what we call Transport for the Southeast Data Hub. It's basically a database which take all the data we have collected, whether this is a travel survey, mobile network data, and then feed that data back into Southeast transport model systems. This is formed by all type of models you probably have heard from your local area, whether this is a highway model or public transport model or variable demand model. And then the models feed back the model outputs back to the database, and then the database provide either data or model outputs to the what we call policy tools or appraisal tools. This would include things like electrical vehicle charging infrastructure tools or decarbonization playbook, which generate the insights which will be more useful to answer policy questions or to test your own policies. And last but definitely not least is the visualization framework, which is a key feature that how we're going to share the data and share the insights rather than gigabytes kind of numbers and spreadsheet. We would like to put those on the map and on some of the dashboard, if you like, and then if you found the interested insights, you can download it directly from there. And one of the key changes this year is previously the plan is pretty much depends on what are the components of the framework and what we need to do for each of the components. But this year, as mentioned, we need to understand, we need to demonstrate how this can give the value to all the LTAs. So by discussing with your officers and particularly through those forums, we have developed this 8 different use cases, which as simple as just filled in some of the data gaps, whether this is on the freight data or the travel behavior data, to things more complicated, whether this is contributed to your own local model as a donor model, or actually testing some of your scenarios or policies or develop some kind of future scenarios to address some of the uncertainties in the future. So that comes to the appendix in the report. Presumably, you have all seen already, which for each one of the projects we basically mapped against those use cases and which use cases each individual project would address. And or some of those projects is more kind of enabling, like the database I mentioned. Basically, that's the foundation, that's the infrastructure in order to be able to build everything else on top of that. So I thought just quickly go through some of the key activities on each of the different components in the analytical framework. So on the data side, as mentioned, we have collected all the mobile network data and the freight data. The raw data is useful, but there's many limitations and issues with the raw data. So this year, we will spend some time to processing the data and combining different data sources, and then to generate the more robust and validate whether this is a freight movements or this is a passenger travel or etc. And another key activity is following the success of 2024 regional travel survey, as we promised and also approved by the board, and we will carry out another regional travel survey, 2026 regional travel survey, following the same format, and this would allow us to keep tracking how the travel behavior changed over the last 2 years, if any. On the modeling, the Southeast Transport Model System, we have already completed the enhancement of 2019 highway model. So this year we will bring the highway model up to date to the 2024 base year, which is the data we have collected for. And also we decided to prioritize on what the technical term called a variable demand model, but what this actually is integrating different transport mode into one tool or model, if you like, and to really try to assess how people would change their travel behavior, whether this is a trip frequency or mode choice or destination choice. And we feel this is this will be a valuable area of spending money on, because this is highly aligned with the latest DFT's national transport strategy in terms of move away from a single mode to a more kind of activity-based and multimodal approach. And the next one is on the policy and appraisal tool. So once the model and the data has been updated, it only would be useful if we update the tools and both the policy tools and appraisal tools. So that will be the next step. And using the updated model and the data, we will update the other tools such as our land use model and EVCI, which is to do with the electrical vehicle. And one of the key requests we received from local officers is to do with how we can better address the uncertainties in the future through our analytical framework. So we will be developing a set of regional analytical scenarios which are exactly trying to address the issue, to have a more localized future scenarios for this region and the local transport authorities, as well as have a set of kind of future scenarios to address the uncertainties. Again, last part on the visualization and the communication. As mentioned, this is a key part to actually communicate the results, the analytical work, which is something highly technical, but this is a key part to make it more accessible and people can see on the map ideally and then download the data from there. So we've been discussing with a colleague from TFN and the supply chain as well, see how they have done in their framework, and we will learn from their experience and develop our framework based on that. Just the last part, as mentioned, since this change of funding mechanism, we are going to need to have a closer look on the governance and the operating model on the analytical framework. Worth mentioning, this is in a draft stage because some of the work will link to the kind of TFC model, as Rupert mentioned earlier, and but on a very high level, TFC will continue to take the strategic leadership on the development of analytical framework, as well as the ownership and the delivery. And also TFC in the future will act as a shared resource pool, if you like, and to provide the support to LTAs and MSAs in the future. And for the members here, and since you will be co-funding the future analytical framework, so you will have definitely have opportunities to set the priorities for the future development of analytical framework and the direction of the development of analytical framework. And also, you all will be the key user of the framework. So ideally, you provide your local data and then have some local applications on the framework. And again, one of the key venue or key platform for this to happen is the Southeast Modeling and Appraisal Forum. As what has happened in the past, is a kind of platform for everyone coming together to share their priorities and see whether there's opportunities for collaboration. So we will see in the future how we can better use the platform to coordinating and also share experience as what we have done in the past. So yes, that's everything in that paper, and I will stop here, and if happy to answer any questions or comments.
Chair, thank you, Joshua, for that presentation. Very helpful, actually. There's clearly a lot in there. And I very much welcome the data-led approach, very informative and does help us go forward. A couple of questions. You talk about the regional and the local. One question I've got in terms of perhaps more the local is, are you including walking within this? And I take it you are doing cycling, but just checking you're using pedestrian aspects for that. And the other question is broadly about, I guess, the analytical approach and in terms of modelling, but you're measuring, or the data is telling us what people are presently doing. But if they, I'll give you an example, because it's an example I've used previously. If somebody comes from Brighton to Maidstone, for instance, at the moment, the logical thing is to get in a car and take an hour and a half to do that journey. To do it by train is 3.5 hours. Whether to be a rail link, people may choose to take the rail option, but they're very unlikely, if they've got a choice, to take 2 hours more to do that journey. So to what extent can it say how to, sorry, to what extent does this data inform the potential for people's choices? I know you're looking at mode of change, but if there isn't a mode to change to, how can that be used?
Thanks. So just on the active travel, walking and cycling, I think at a regional level, there's a balance need to be kept, because this is not just on the active travel, this is also on the bus as well. And if we're trying to do everything at a regional level, then we very easily and very quickly come to the situation how detailed is detailed enough at a regional level, and whether you can justify the money and the efforts you spend on this particular item, or whether it's better we provide the data and let the local transport authority, your officer, to actually handle the more detailed analysis or develop your own model or your own tools to serve this kind of a purpose. And this is not my words, actually. This is by engaging with your officers, and they all, in some form, have a kind of public transport model, and some of them have a walking cycling model. Having said that, they do identify a gap in active travel. That's why we've been working very closely with academia, in particular something didn't show on the screen, but we're supporting Leeds University to put on the bids for basically see how new technology can help to fill in the gap on active travel. And so I think our role on that particular aspect is more try to see where the innovation kind of area are to fill in those data gaps as one of the use cases, fill in the data gap. And we will continue trying to fill in those data gap, and then provide that evidence to your local officers and see whether they can generate more insights from the data we have provided. In terms of the modeling present versus propensity or what could happen in the future, that's really good question. I think there's two things. First, again, as you can tell, I'm very data-driven people. So I would refer back to the data. That's exactly why we decided to do a 2024 regional travel survey as well as 2026 regional travel survey. And ideally, this will keep going, refresh every other year. Because in this way, you have the solid data to see what actually has changed in your local area, and at the same time comparing with what actually has changed on, in the infrastructure level, if anything has changed, whether there's, in this particular area, whether there's a new junction or there's a new walking cycling link, and then does that have any impacts on how many people actually taking on the active travel, for example. So that's something we're trying to do from the evidence level, data level. What that data does is that will feeding into our models and the tools, and the model and the tools will be built on that, and to kind of have a functionality to estimate how people would change their behavior based on the change of either the costs of travel in the sense of new public transport and the change of fuel price, or whether there's infrastructure to reduce the journey time, and that's arguably another kind of cost of travel. I hope that answers your questions on that.
Any other questions? Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I think this is fun. I mean, I was conscious that the governance operational side of this report, probably from our board perspective, is the key part for us to pay attention to, really. If we can, reflecting the idea of having the modelling and appraisal forum and stuff like that, that's where we're going to, at this level, really benefit from how this all works. But then taking it down to the officer level and all that data, that's the key part of how this delivers. I'm just thinking in terms of the prospectus, and how we, I hate to say that, use the word sell, but how we use this to talk to the minister, to talk to potential other users and stuff like that, how we can translate this into the right language for drawing in. That's a key part of what we've got to achieve as well, I take it. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. Is everyone happy with that report? Good. Okay. Thanks very much. Cheers. Moving on to, thank you, Joshua. Moving on to item 11, the Advisory Panel and Transport Forum. I'll pass over to Rupert.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So members will know, those members around will know that Jeff French, who chaired the Transport Forum, stood down at the last meeting. And we felt that this provided a suitable opportunity to look at how the Transport Forum operated, so to review its membership, its purpose and its role, to make sure it stays fit for purpose, particularly in how we support stakeholder engagement in the future. It had grown quite significantly. We want to involve forum members directly in the process. And then once that review is concluded, we'll be back to the board not only with setting out the conclusions of that review, but I would imagine to seek an appointment for a new chair as well. So the outcomes and recommendations will come back to this board meeting. We'll also take the opportunity to review the advisory panel alongside the Transport Forum as well. And that reflects the fact that several thematic groups have completed their work programmes. So it sort of reduces the number of active groups, if you like, that feed into the panel. And again, those report findings and recommendations will come back to this board meeting. So this is really about making sure that our stakeholder structures remain fit for purpose, particularly given the current financial situation, but also as devolution progresses, as strategic authorities start to emerge, as LGR takes effect, and in particular as we move into a sort of post-2027 operating model. We think that review is timely. That's.
Are there any questions on that? Got no, lots of shaking heads. So we've got a couple of things to recommend from this. Firstly, do we agree to the formal review of the Transport Forum and Advisory Panel? And secondly, appointment of a new chair for the Transport Forum following the completion of this review. Colleagues happy with that? Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to our finance update, passing over to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. So this paper provides an update to the board on the financial position of Transport for the South East, and there are three parts to that. Firstly, the end-of-year position for 2025-26, and then the proposed budget for 26-27, and a financial update until the end of June 2026. So with relation to the first one, the draft budget, I suppose, was presented to the March board. However, at that time, the end-of-year finance figures weren't available from the East Sussex County Council as our host authority. So this report updates those. Now we do have those final figures. And that shows that the total expenditure for TFSE in 2025-26 was 2,868,146 against a funding supply of 3,865,322, and we also hold an additional £496,730 in reserve, as Rupert mentioned earlier. The main reason for the less spend than there was income was due to a slight underspend on the technical programme. It was lower than the overall budget, but it was also in line with the forecast that was presented to the March board. And of that figure, around half of it was already committed expenditure for work that had started, but just was not able to be completed within the timeframe before the end of the financial year. That was largely around the strategic implementation, implementation, and also the analytical framework and private financing work. And there was a few knock-on effects that meant that some work couldn't actually start because some other work was delayed, and that's explained within the report. Some of the underspend was also due to the uncertainty of future funding following the DFT announcement in September, when we looked at postponing and reducing the scope of some of the planned projects because of that. So the remaining uncommitted underspend has been reallocated within the budget for 2026-27, rolled forward into the new financial year. So at the end of the financial year, we had a final carry-forward figure of just under £1 million, which did include one of the local authority subscriptions that was paid earlier within that, which is why there's a discrepancy between the two financial years. We've moved that subscription onto the correct budget line. In terms of the proposed budget for 2026-27, that's set out in the business plan that you discussed earlier with Rupert, but also in this paper as well. And we've got a final budget of just around £3.5 million, based on the DFT funding of £1.5 million, local contributions of just under £500,000, and the technical programme carry forward as well. We have increased the level of reserve for this financial year. It has been recalculated by the host authority, particularly with the potential move to a strategic authority. It's important that no liability is transferred, and so the reserve amount has actually increased this year to cover that risk. In terms of the financial position to the end of June, that's set out in Appendix 3, and we've spent around 289,000 across all budget lines. That is obviously a low amount and not necessarily a 12th of the expenditure you'll expect, but we have only commissioned new work during that time whilst the proposed budget was still being calculated. So it's only been urgent work that was commissioned. Now that we have that draft, that position, we will obviously commission further work and also repay on completion of work rather than upfront. So the work has been commissioned but not yet paid for. We'll continue to monitor the spend as we go through the financial year, and the board will continue to receive updates, which will also go to the Audit and Governance Committee for their scrutiny as well before coming here. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions on the question?
Thanks very much, Sarah. And so our colleagues happy to agree the recommendations as laid out, the end of year position, agree the proposed budget for the coming year, and note the financial position at the end of quarter one. Thank you very much.
Good.
Moving on to the next items are all information items. So this next one, item 13, is on the electrical vehicle on-street charging solutions study. And as Steve pointed out, there may be a point where you may want to. Yeah, okay. So handing over to Ben. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. This agenda item focuses on a recently completed piece of work regarding the challenges that local transport authorities kind of continue to face when considering, I'm not sure if that's different on-street charging solutions as part of the rollout of EV charging infrastructure. This work actually grew out of kind of engagement that we had with officers from across the area in the previous financial year, which identified a kind of a set series of barriers and a clear appetite for a consistent regional evidence base when considering these different charging solutions. The report itself is it's a two-parter, really. The first part basically has kind of developed a baseline of current on-street charging provision across the TFC area. And then the second part of the report is an assessment of the emerging technologies and alternative approaches to on-street charging solutions. I guess the key message that comes out of the report really is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all fit for the TFC area, and instead we need to kind of consider different kind of charging solutions, basically kind of going off the evidence of local context across each of our local transport authority areas. Therefore, with the local transport authority engagement, we have developed this future options playbook, which is designed to help officers within authorities to match solutions to different street types. And I think kind of from my perspective, this has been a really interesting piece of work over the last 6 months or so, as we look to kind of challenge or kind of we look to tackle one of these big challenges that are faced in terms of EVCI rollout. And it's something that we'll be kind of continuing to look to build upon as we kind of move forward with our EVCI work programme in this current financial year as well. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions there may be.
Thank you, Ben. That's very, very good. As you're probably fully aware, Brighton Hove are really steaming ahead with on-street public EV charging. We're really passionate about it, and we're sort of leading the way, particularly outside of London. We've got a very significant next phase of that with Levi funding of Chargey on the lamppost, and we believe on our rapid and ultra-rapid hubs, etc. So we're really very much, this is really important to us. And one of the things that we've explored is around density. Density of, if you've got lampposts, if you put enough in, then people don't feel the need to have a very small number and everything's defined by a bay. It's actually defined by if you've got a lamppost and you can legally park in that location, and that becomes the driver. And as the uptake of EV picks up, it releases some of the barriers, because a lot of people in our city, particularly those living in terraces or flats, say, love to get an EV, but I haven't got a driveway, it doesn't work for me. And so you just try and overcome that barrier by putting a public charge. So it really is a game changer for so many people who really want to move to a zero tailpipe emission solution. And we're seeing that pick up. And just having a policy lead on this is people feeling very comfortable in making that step. And once they have an EV, so many people say, I'll never look back, I'll never go back to burning carbon and it's really air quality as well, making a big difference to our city. That's one of the reasons why we're very keen to take this forward as a city, because it's impactful in terms of air quality. And so that's what we're doing, and certainly this paper really helps and bring together what works in that more urban setting. One of the challenges and questions we often get in from residents is, can we get a cross-pavement solution? And I think the guidance, obviously the trials are being taken forward in various authorities. The guidance perhaps opens up more questions than it does answers. So in terms of who's liable, insurance, and how it all fits. And so I think we're looking to set up a trial, particularly relating to Motability and their move towards EV as a policy, and also how they. So we've got a resource use of the grant, so we can then apply that to cost pavements for those Motability and for taxis. But I think there's some. I don't know if you agree. I think there's some hard work more to do in the application for the guidance in relation to the trials that have happened and the trials ongoing, so we can come up with a consistent approach, particularly in more urban areas. Does that help?
No, that's actually that's a really good point. And part of the engagement that we had with officers as part of this initial piece of work really kind of showed myself and kind of colleagues within the project team that there's a different local authorities are trying to kind of solve this challenge in different ways. And I think if there's anything I can do as we build upon this work in this kind of current financial year, it would be taking the time to speak more in depth with local authorities across the area, Brighton and Hove being one, learning the lessons that are kind of, or learning from the lessons that are kind of being experienced within that local authority, and then kind of bringing the group of officers together from the southeast and trying to kind of share best practice with one another, but also begin to kind of see if there's anything that we can kind of do more regionally in order to kind of ensure that the rollout of this on-street charging is as effective, but also safe as well. I think that's kind of the one objective that I would like to achieve in this new kind of financial year that we're in.
Is that better? Yes. I'm conscious that as local authorities, we tend to base many of our decisions on evidence and history. But this market is moving incredibly quickly, particularly in light of new developments in technology, in batteries, etc., let alone in charging and wireless charging. Are we, as a group, engaged with everyone from the DNOs, the grid providers, but importantly, the car manufacturers and the battery technology providers? And how does that influence what we're coming up with as recommendations? Because a lot of that is going to be future development rather than history-based. My concern is that we don't fall into the trap that some of the landline providers fell into with mobile phones when they were basing it on history of landline use, which was completely different to mobile phones, and we mustn't go down that rabbit warren.
Yeah, that's a really good point. In terms of kind of TFSC's EVCI workstream as a whole, we've actually had really good engagement with the two distribution network operators across the southeast. But as part of our kind of wider engagement package, we're also speaking to various other bodies, kind of national bodies, in order to ensure that that feedback or their kind of views and insight are being taken into our kind of EVCI work program. I think one thing that would be really good as we've kind of now got to this point, you know, our EVCI work's really 3 years old. So now we've got to this point where it's kind of evolved into being relatively useful and not kind of just capturing data from across the region. What I would really like to do is kind of begin to further enhance some of those relationships that local transport authority officers are experiencing with DNOs, but also through TFC's Fleet Electrification Working Group as well. So if we can kind of begin to build this, I don't know, I guess almost a spiderweb style of communication regarding this topic, then that can only lead to a more kind of comprehensive and robust charging network being rolled out across the southeast as a whole.
Any other questions there? I've just got a couple of points from myself. One is in relation to, was there one? Yeah, go ahead.
I did, but it could easily wait until yours as well. It really is clearly a very topical thing because electric vehicles are now moving to the point where it used to be just early adopters, environmental enthusiasts and technology enthusiasts and mainstream kind of stuff. So I'm assuming that this work is also being done around the rest of the country as well. And I was just wondering, this is the Transport Southeast body, but we take learnings from other places as well, and presumably radiate out back to them as well. How do we do that? What does this body do to connect up with other bodies to make sure we're not reinventing the wheel?
It's a very good question. As part of the kind of STB community, we have regular meetings through the 7 subnational transport bodies across the area, where we share kind of lessons learned and best practice with one another. As it kind of stands right now, each of the kind of STBs has taken on the lead role in a different kind of smaller topic of the kind of rollout of EVCI. So from a TFC perspective, my predominant focus over the last couple of years has been around kind of commercial vehicle fleet electric, or kind of transition for commercial vehicles to electric. But this on-street charging work, this was a fallout from some stakeholder engagement that we did with our local authorities across the area, and this was something that they really highlighted that they would like some help with. So kind of from here, what I will do is I will be sharing this kind of work with our colleagues across the rest of the STB network. And further afield as well, we have a kind of an EVCI forum that meets on a regular basis with various working groups through that as well. So it's all about, I think, in order to kind of ensure that a lot of money is kind of going towards the rollout of charging infrastructure, in order to ensure that it's being rolled out as effectively as possible, we need to kind of share lessons learned with each other and continue to engage and make sure everything begins to link up.
And just if I may, extending that a little bit further, picking up from one of the other points, are we looking not just in the UK as well, because this technology is pretty much global, although it's got different nuances in different places, but some of the learnings must clearly be really applicable. And what for me was very useful in going through the report was also, on the flip side, going back down the other way, was where you actually kind of organised into the different groupings and the pulling out the different use cases and stressing the need to be really clear about what problem you were trying to resolve with what piece of effort. I think as local authorities, we often end up trying to have 20 problems and needing to come up with 25 solutions, and it was worthwhile being told to actually just be clear which are your priorities at the moment, what is this investment seeking to do.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think, so whilst I've kind of been leading on our EVCI workstream, I've sought out I've spoken with organisations in Norway and Australia in the past, and we've kind of been able to kind of hear some examples on how they've been rolling out EV charging infrastructure in each of those locations. But I think with this, it's a relatively new kind of piece of technology. It's very much in its infancy as we begin to kind of head out on this kind of S-curve towards EV uptake as we move forward. So the more lessons that we can learn from, not just in the, within the Southeast, but nationally and internationally as well, hopefully we can kind of begin to build a, we can kind of begin to head in the right direction in terms of identifying where and kind of, the power in which these this charging infrastructure is required across each of our geographies.
Curious as to what's being done and how you're going to resolve, or how we resolve, the issues with charging in rural communities. How do we stop them from being left behind?
That's a great question. And when we set out on this journey with our EVCI workstream, one of the kind of challenges or risks, I guess, that we identified was this potential landscape. If you take the kind of TFC area as a whole, and you see where charging infrastructure is being kind of placed in as we kind of currently speak, it's mainly in this kind of bigger towns and cities. And one thing that we really need to try and avoid is this kind of oasis and deserts look across the southeast, where we're having charging infrastructure built into the kind of town and city environments, but those big kind of rural areas across the geography are being left behind a bit. So what, I guess, part of the role in which TFC could be moving forward is to work closely with officers on the ground who have received the Levi funding in order to roll out charging infrastructure and continue to look at the baseline that we developed a few years ago around forecasting the uptake of EVs and where energy charging demand is needed, and kind of continuing to monitor that as we kind of build, as we move into the kind of coming years around the installation of charging infrastructure. So it's something that's on my radar from a TFC level, and I think kind of one of the strengths that we have as a kind of a regional body is that we can bring local authority officers together to not only kind of just look within their own geographies, but there's this need for cross-boundary infrastructure rollout as well.
Any other questions? Just got a couple of points from myself. One is around one of the issues we have in Medway. I think I've sort of highlighted it before, is on the almost having to work at a street by street level. A lot of our street lamps are at the back of the pavement, which makes it really difficult to even think about doing street lighting as the option. Also, the power to the street lights, because they're old, really old ones, isn't really sufficient. So there is an issue around almost having to work at street by street level, which is a challenge. And I'll come back to that in a minute. The other one is around a huge demand, or increase in demand from our local businesses, commercial vehicle charging, and looking at how we can identify locations in key areas across our patch, if you like, where commercial vehicles can charge up, and finding those and working around solutions to that demand, if you like. And then also, I think one of the things that came out from the conversation, a couple of the questions there, is about how important that really close collaboration between yourselves and the local teams on the ground is. We've reached that stage now where we need to do that much more detailed work going on. I mean, those are the sort of three bits that I picked up there. I don't know if you've got a comment on that.
Yeah, so in terms of the commercial, I'll get used to holding this at a certain distance, commercial vehicle stance, that's, as I think I mentioned 5 minutes ago or so, that's an area of work that from a TFC perspective we're leading on within the STB community. Now what we need to do in terms of those larger vehicles and the transition to electric is ensure that the public infrastructure that's being rolled out currently is also accessible to these large vehicles. So predominantly at the minute we're working on the kind of with a focus on ELCVs. So we're wanting to, within the last year we've been working with the likes of the BVRLA, Logistics UK, SMMT, and kind of looking at kind of some of the characteristics that some of these parking, these charging hub bays will require in terms of accessibility. Now, obviously, those large vehicles probably aren't going to be using on-street charging. So an area of work that we're looking to undertake in a bit more detail at TFSC is around the identification of some of these urban charging hubs within the across different areas of our kind of remit. So it's something that's very much in its early stages at the minute, but hopefully at one of the upcoming next meetings of the board, I'll be able to kind of bring that to the table and showcase that piece of work with you as well.
Okay, thanks very much. Any other comments? Are people happy to note that report? And we'll hear more jiggles. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, moving on to our next report on the Centre of Excellence. This is James.
Yeah, good afternoon, Mark Vallely, Head of Strategy at Transport for the South East. The purpose of the report is just to give you an update on progress with the delivery of the Centre of Excellence. Sarah introduced the concept in her presentation this morning about the Centre of Excellence, which essentially is a digital platform that provides officers from local transport authorities with access to resources that they otherwise might not be able to find as easily. Includes delivery of tools and webinars around specific topics that have been identified where there are capability gaps. So as the report says, the Centre of Excellence currently supports about 350 registered users across the local transport authorities, and 300 from local transport authorities, 50 users from national agencies, universities and industry partners. In terms of recent delivery of content, since the last board meeting in March, we've run a total of 8 webinars and held one in-person training event. Further information about the programme of work that's been delivered is set out in Appendix 1 to the report. We then move on to the capability survey, which is our mechanism for identifying on an annual basis, is sort of having a dialogue with our 16 local transport authorities to find out what their particular needs are moving forward. Now, this took place between March and April this year. And as a consequence of that, we've identified a sort of a work programme for this year, which is set out in paragraph 3.2 of the report, or section 4, which is structured around 4 key themes, as it says there: strategic policy, leadership and decision making, stakeholder-focused transport planning, evidence-based scheme development, decarbonisation, zero-emission vehicles and freight planning. Which supports some of the other technical work that we're undertaking. A full version of the work plan for 26-27 set out in Appendix 2 to the report. Lastly, on monitoring and evaluation, Appendix 3 to the report contains some important sort of analytics and data on how the Centre of Excellence is performing, particularly in terms of sort of uptake and activity across the different months of the year. We also have a Centre of Excellence steering group consisting of officers from the local transport authorities who meet on a regular basis, just as a mechanism for check and challenge around the overall direction of travel with the Centre of Excellence, just to make sure we're delivering what our local transport authorities are seeking. In terms of sort of financial position, an allocation of £150,000 a year set out in paragraph 7 has been identified to deliver the Centre of Excellence programme over the following year, with a detailed breakdown of how that allocation is split out amongst the individual work areas set out in Appendix 2. So as the recommendation is, members are asked just to comment on the progress being made with the delivery of the Centre of Excellence. Happy to take any questions on any of that.
Moving on to item 15, technical programme update.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is just to give members an update on progress of some of the components of the technical work programme, which is the EVCI work, the work we're undertaking on freight logistics and gateways, and work on rail and also decarbonisation. So on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, Ben has just talked you through the work that we've been done on the on-street charging study, which is now complete. We've also undertaken a 4-part webinar series that was delivered through the Centre of Excellence on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which was completed in March. Moving forward, the good news is that the work that we've been undertaking on the on-street charging solutions, there's going to be a phase 2 to that work, which will be involving a deeper dive, looking at the toolkit that was produced as part of phase 1 and working through some case study examples with a number of constituent local transport authorities to look at the practical application of some of the concepts that were identified during phase 1. We'll also be taking forward our work on urban public charging for light commercial vehicles, looking at how we can support local transport authorities in identifying opportunities for the introduction of charging infrastructure to meet the needs of that particular element of the vehicle fleet. On freight logistics and gateways, we're about to launch on Wednesday of this week, our freight awareness programme, which is an e-training course for local transport authorities and spatial planners, looking to increase their awareness of the needs of the freight sector, particularly so that they can better plan for those needs when making or thinking about the future and the development of the places in which they operate. This is going to be delivered. We developed the course in association with the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transport, and the material will be delivered through their website. It will consist of a number of self-administered modules covering 16 topic areas, each 16 topic areas, each taking between about 15 or 20 minutes to complete. And the topics that we're going to cover are set out in paragraph 3 of the report. Also on freight, the wider South East Freight Forum that we heard something about in Sarah's presentation this morning continues to meet. This is as Sarah explained, it's a forum, provides us with a mechanism alongside England's Economic and Transport East to engage with the freight sector. So a mechanism for having a dialogue between local transport authority officers and representatives from the freight sector about some of the challenges that they're facing moving forward. Last meeting held on the 2nd of July with a particular focus on some of the challenges that the freight sector is facing moving from transition from diesel to electric and battery powered vehicles. Work has also commenced on the development of a TFSE future freight fuel infrastructure strategy. We'll look to examine the infrastructure that's going to be needed across the South East to support the transition of freight vehicles to alternative fuels. Just turning to rail, work continues alongside England's Economic Heartland, Transport East and Transport East, England's Economic Heartlands, Network Rail, DFT and TfL as part of a wider South East Rail partnership, very much prompting the arrival of the new Great British Railways, making sure that we have a collective voice on the issues and challenges that we're going to face with the rail sector moving forward. So a mechanism for engagement while that transition takes place and to influence its outcomes. Work are going to commence this year on a first mile, last mile rail integration study, looking at how we can better integrate rail with the other modes by looking at that important first mile, last mile section of the trips that people make to railway stations to ensure that more of those trips are made using sustainable forms of transport. Just lastly on decarbonisation, the carbon assessment playbook that the STB community have developed collectively, work is continuing to take place on this. This provides a mechanism for local transport authorities to be able to assess the carbon impacts of the local transport interventions that they're thinking of introducing as part of their local transport plans, This tool has now been embraced by the Department of Transport following the publication of the new guidance related to the development of local transport plans that requires local transport authorities to undertake such an assessment as part of the development of their local transport plans. So the good news is that DFT are now putting some funding into the further development of the carbon assessment playbook to make sure it will do everything it needs to do given its given the new requirements from the through the local transport plan. So there's just a quick update on some of the other components of the technical programme. Happy to take any questions on any of those.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick questions. The first one is in terms of net zero and some of the political discussions around decarbonisation versus actually cost reduction. Do we have a position on that? And secondly, in terms of decarbonisation, are we including things like Scope 3 emissions?
Just to answer the second one, no, the Scope 3, very much the focus of the work that the carbon assessment playbook looks at is tailpipe emissions, so it's very much focused on, because that's the metric that the DFT are using. On the kind of the whole question of decarbonisation versus cost reduction, clearly with the sort of the government and net zero, very much our focus is on helping local transport authorities deliver on that, given that it's a sort of a mandatory requirement. So the focus of the work very much is on providing the mechanism for them to be able to assess the carbon impacts of the interventions that they're looking at. So in terms of that wider piece about are we trying to influence people's decision about what they should do individually? No, what we're doing is making sure that we're helping local transport authorities deliver what is the requirement of them from the DFT.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really helpful presentation. Just pick up on one thing you said in terms of road freight. And perhaps it's in the report, and so I may have missed it. But you referenced particularly EV road freight, but you didn't in your presentation there reference hydrogen. Is that still on the focus, or is it more going over to EV HGVs?
No, when we're looking at the future fuels, it's a future fuel. It doesn't say electric, so we are still open, as everybody has to be, to the prospect that there are two potential solutions there. Quite, the evidence and the investment that's going on at the moment is still those two things are still in play. But as time is moving on, I would suggest that the future is looking increasingly electric for HGVs, given the technology is already there, it's proven, whereas the sort of the development of the hydrogen solution, all I would say, the evidence is very few hydrogen trucks on the road. That's not to say that it won't continue to have a role in certain settings around potentially very much longer distance journeys. Potentially there is a role for it there, and we have to still be open to the idea there may be two solutions to the same problem. But my only sort of personal view is that it's looking increasing like the electric is the thing that's coming to the fore.
Any other
Just wanted to add in just something that's a Medway-based thing. In Medway we've got 4 air quality management areas, which is quite serious levels of air pollution. But as a result of this kind of work, one of those is now to be taken out, which is a huge result. It takes time to see the outcomes of this work, but as a result of all the effort going into decarbonising, cutting tailpipe emissions, going electric, all those issues, the outcomes then for the local community in that part of Medway is fantastic. And that's the kind of results and the outcomes that we're looking for. So thanks very much, and we'll keep on doing it. Yeah. Okay, moving on to item 16, and that's the delivery of our strategic investment plan. And I'll pass over to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this paper just provides an update on a range of different work streams which all together support delivery of the schemes and policies within the Strategic Investment Plan. Some of them I touched on this morning, so I'll whiz through those quite quickly. But the sort of work to communicate the Strategic Investment Plan and also to help support delivery of the schemes within the plan around our interactive story map, our delivery action plan, which tracks progress of the scheme, and the strategic prioritisation framework. That work is all ongoing, and the base data that supports all three of those things is the same. So we've taken the opportunity to sort of optimise how they can operate together rather than having them as three standalone pieces of work. In terms of scheme development work, again, I touched on this morning. So we have, over the last 3 years, provided £800,000 worth of funding towards 14 different schemes in terms of supporting feasibility studies and business cases. And we do still have some of that work which is still being undertaken and finished off into this financial year. As I said earlier, unfortunately, the budget position means it's tricky to do that in the future, but we're very much looking to how we can best support scheme development, how we can make expertise available, how we can make the tools and the models and the data available to continue to support that. So we will very happily work with everybody in the future on that. Specifically around the Major Road Network and Large Local Majors programme, that is something that government back in 2019, I believe, asked all STBs to prioritise across their area. So this board prioritised the schemes that were to be taken forward in the programme, and since then we've continued to support their development, also supporting DFT as they've done their work as well. Last year, the DFT did announce a review of the schemes that were in the programme, and there were 7 schemes in the TFSE area that are under review. Since then, 4 have been confirmed as remaining in the programme. 1 was removed on a sort of jointly agreeable basis due to deliverability issues, and we are still waiting a decision on the final 2. But the table within the report sets out where each of those schemes are, and since this report was drafted a couple of weeks ago, very good news over in Brighton that the Kings Road Arches scheme has received its final funding approval, which is brilliant. It's taken a lot to get there, but credit to Brighton and Hove for actually persevering through all the difficulties with that. Third road investment strategy, Alice referred to earlier the work the National Highways has done with the Department for Transport to develop that, and we've been involved as a stakeholder through that process, making sure that the priorities being identified through the RIS programme match the priorities that we know about through the Strategic Investment Plan, and that they all line up. It is unfortunately disappointing that the final RIS doesn't have a huge amount of schemes within the area, but we're very happy to keep working with National Highways and DFT to continue to make the case. We know that just because schemes aren't in the programme, that doesn't mean that the trouble on the network has gone away, but we're very, very happy and undertaking some work through the Funding and Financing Group to look at maybe how schemes can be brought forward alternatively to being put through national programmes, and the board will receive an update on that report at that time. I think that pretty much sort of sums up everything that's that work stream, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, and now moving on to item 17, which is our communication strategy for 26-27 and the engagement update. And I'm passing back to James.
Thank you, nearly there. So the last quarter or so we've been very busy looking at the local elections, as I'm sure you've all been involved in that as well. The implications of that, the results in terms of the composition of the board, who is coming, the members, the new members particularly. So we're pleased to see many of you are here today. We've also been putting a lot of work into the induction pack for the board, which you've had today. I'm not sure you've had a chance to look through it yet, but maybe if you have a look, hopefully it's very helpful for you, just to help you provide a little bit of a backdrop to the day and what we do here for TFSE. We've also updated the comms engagement strategy to reflect the change in political and local government landscape that we've touched upon in the induction earlier today. Places a stronger focus this time around on supporting our constituent local transport authorities and communicating our roles, values and benefits. It's targeting a practical approach to comms and stakeholder engagement, ensuring TFSE remains visible, relevant and influential at this changing time. And also we're particularly keen to strengthen our relationships with local authorities, government and our key partners. In the pack, you've also had a new prospectus, which we've designed to help to try and clearly articulate the support that TFSC provides to member authorities. The prospectus recognises the challenges facing local authorities, the importance of regional collaboration, and the value that TFSC can add through shared analysis and evidence, coordination of cross-border boundaries, and by presenting a strong, consistent regional case to government. So we hopefully, if there's any comments on that, we'd be happy to receive them via email or even later if anyone's had a chance to read it. We printed them out today so people can see them, but there'll be a soft copy that we can then amend for different target audiences as we move on. So maybe say businesses or other areas that we can focus the messaging in. From a public affairs perspective, we've already touched on the letter that former Chair Keith Glazier wrote to Secretary of State. Chair, I'm pleased to hear that you're looking to follow that up, so that'd be interesting to hear any impact from that. We've also provided detailed information to the Bexhill and Battle MP, Kieran Mullen, following his request for an update on the A21 corridor. This highlighted opportunities to improve safety, resilience and reliability along the route. Rupert attended a roundtable discussion hosted by Mims Davis MP and Natasha Irons MP on behalf of GTR. This focused on the Brighton Main Line and the Croydon area remodelling scheme, with participants considering future investment priorities and network performance. And alongside that, we've also engaged with the Gatwick Diamond APPG. They're looking to do an integrated transport deep dive across the south, particularly in our area. So we had a meeting a few weeks ago. They've lent heavily on a lot of the work we've done before, like the transport strategy particularly. So waiting to see the outcome of that, how we can progress that with them. Social media, we continue to do that. Obviously, during the pre-election period, it was slightly reduced, but we still managed to gain over 50 new followers on LinkedIn. And we've also undertaken a series of improvements on the TFSC website to enhance navigation and make key information more accessible to users. So a quick run through there.
Thank you. That's a helpful summary. Just a brief question. You talk about LinkedIn and social media. How are we reaching out to young people?
Well, in particular, young people?
Yeah, I'm thinking young, how do we the next generation to make sure they're part of the process as we plan for the future?
Well, I mean, as you say, LinkedIn is a good one, and there are other ways that we can do it. Things like TikTok and social media, other areas of social media. We'd have to look how we would resource that, because I think it's okay to say social media, but actually the way you resource TikTok is quite particular in the way that audience engages with it. Instagram is another thing, but we need images, and we don't provide images ourselves. The images come from everybody, and so we can help promote the work that you've done if we get more information about that. So say, like the Kings Road Arches, for example, we put that on LinkedIn last week. We got quite a lot of feedback, well, not feedback particularly, but we got quite a few likes, which we don't normally get. So for some reason, that resonated with people. So that was, we can try and understand a bit more about that. So the young people, it's quite difficult with this messaging, but it's like the chair was saying earlier, young people are engaged in this, and it's interesting to hear your thoughts about the fact that they wanted buses rather than their own cars. So maybe this is an area that we need to spend a bit more time to try and get under the I think, but from our perspective, I think the real messaging will come from local authorities, because you've got the tales to tell about the transport, about the buses, about the reduced reduced fares and stuff. We can help to resonate that, but I think that will draw broadly from local authorities. So, but yeah, we're happy to pick that up if necessary.
It just might be worth adding, some of you, if not all of you, will have either youth cabinets or youth councils. So as members of this board, there's an opportunity to ask questions of your youth councils. And you might also find your directors of children's services, are well played into that sort of youth voice. And, we would welcome input from you, feedback from you from those youth councils or youth groups.
I was just going to ask if you could say a bit more about those comms relationships with the local transport authorities. and how you engage. I've noticed that in the strategic focus there's a little bit of information, but I wondered if you could elaborate.
Yeah, I think we do have links with them, but I think a lot of it is we would. So, for example, in our Connections newsletter, we would have we carry stories from local authorities that we can share in basically your successes through our own channels. I think a lot of it is information fed back into us. I know obviously comms teams are busy with comms from everything, and what we want is a small part of that. And it's very difficult. We have tried to look into this, and I'm not sure there's an appetite from comms teams, particularly to come back specifically on transport issues. But we have got relationships with them. We have linked in with West Sussex, for example. When you open the A29, so we work with you on that to promote that, particularly at that point, because there was a good news story on that one. But we could look into a more ongoing dialogue. But I do, having come from a comms team background, I do know that what we want is a small part of their bigger demands, a bigger picture. But I'm happy to hear if, for example, you've got some ideas or your team wants to work more with us. So, yeah, happy with that.
Is that going to be better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Couple of things. One is that in National Highways, I hope we do still, sorry, my knowledge is a little bit out of date, do we still meet with you in terms of comms? Because we try to line up with the STBs and amplify your messages at the same time as, vice versa. Good. The other thing was that, again, out of date knowledge, a few years ago, STBs used to, well, first of all, you ran your own conference as STBs, then it was sort of folded into and part of the Interchange Conference. I don't know if that was something that was done this year. And also we've got Highways UK coming up at the autumn, and I know, again, it's going back a few years that STBs had a big presence at Highways UK. I think perhaps funding situations perhaps led that to be scaled back. So I just thought I'd just flag
no,
those
that's true.
two.
Last year we went to Interchange, all of us went. This year, not all of us went, partly because of the funding situation, the changing situation. It's, you know, I think it's the STB globally, nationally is a different, you know, we do have links with comms teams. I spoke to TA Transport East last week, for example, on various issues. So we do have relationships from a comms perspective, but we're not doing any programme of work particularly because I think we're focusing more on our own regional activity rather than across the board. But it's a fair point.
I think the other thing I'd add on that, Alice, is we want, if we go to things, we want to do so where we can offer, we'll get best bang for our buck. We've either got something that we want to push, or we've been invited to speak. So, for example, Ben has on a number of occasions been invited to speak on EV matters. Joshua has been to Modelling World, I think, you know, and stuff like that. You know, where we can add value, we go. And it's not just a case of, you know, turning up because it looks like it's a nice thing to do. If National Highways want to sponsor any places for us or anything, you know where we are.
Thank you.
So clearly funding is a big issue that's out there, and although, you know, we're all local authority people here, ultimately national government is critical on this matter. They're the ones who ultimately control the purse strings. So in previous times, and I saw it referred to in here, we talked about engagement with MPs, and I remember seeing a previous report where we'd seen a proportion of the MPs across the region with a plan to speak to more. Can you just update a little bit about where we've got on that type of briefing? I was pleased to see there were a couple of things actually in the report about specific MPs we had spoken to.
Yeah, we have tried to engage. They're notoriously difficult, really, to engage with individually. I think they'll engage with you if there's something specific in their area, and we can help, like we did with the A21. And that was something that they were able to benefit from our knowledge on that. We do have a spreadsheet of engagement activities that we do. Like say, Rupert met with a couple of MPs recently as well. I think with the changing focus from the funding issue, I think that is our audience now is far more important from a local authority perspective. I'm not saying MPs aren't important, but I think from a focus, I think number one focus is local authorities, and I think MPs now might fall down into like a secondary scale on that. But no, still important. So the APPG is an important area that's come up with the Gatwick Diamond, and we are engaged with that quite heavily in terms of understanding what they want from that and what we can how we can help them with that. I think that could be quite fruitful once that starts to happen a bit more. But I say it's tricky sometimes, I think, with MPs, because it's hard to get the traction. We sent the strategy to everybody once that was done, and we didn't really get any response from anyone. So it's not necessarily we get people saying, "Oh, thank you very much, that's really interesting," but it's more, it's the dialogue that's very difficult to break through, and there's lots of other issues that they've got to deal with. But I take your point.
I just want to add again, some of this, Peter, is possibly me going, no, we're not doing this because there's a cost associated with it, and it's really focusing on where we can get traction. Now, historically, we have done events, and they've been quite successful. We've done one at Portcullis House before now. We've done a couple of, you've all done it in your careers, a dining room B moment, where you all go down there and MPs turn up, and there may be some merit in doing that again, but we want to do it for something specific, something that has purpose. Now, of course, our new chair, I suspect, will want to develop a programme of engagement and get round the regions, and that provides an opportunity to do some more MP work. But the sort of larger set piece stuff is really focusing on where can we really make our mark. And it might be a moment, Chair, to just bring the department in, actually, given the point you make about funding. And it's only fair we give Dan a run out on this.
So I won't rehash too many of the points been already made on funding, but I'd probably split your question, Peter, into two parts. So when you talk about funding, there's the funding of Transport for the South East as an organisation, which I think, as Rupert articulated quite accurately, the DfT ministers decided at the last spending review that they weren't able to provide central funding for subnational transport bodies, and looked therefore for regional organisations, whether that be strategic authorities or county council authorities, etc., to fund those locally in the sort of the model which suited best. Now, we appreciate the challenges of that, but I think there's that point. I think the sort of wider point that I think you made in terms of the role of national government, of course, is the funding of transport schemes themselves, which is, of course, the much greater quantum, where the engagement, the importance of articulating that and engaging with the department and others is as important as ever. So, in a sense, there's the sort of slightly smaller point about funding of the organisation itself. Obviously, that is important, but either way, what we're trying to make sure is that the right links still exist between the department, between National Highways, between other organisations, to enable Transport the South East to sort of help you all as a region articulate your priorities. And so we'll continue to work with you on that. But and I think both of those things are important. And as I say, the personal view, it's probably going to be quite hard to get an MP particularly interested in the funding of a particular organisation, but it will be you might find it will be easier to get MPs to sort of unite behind a particular local transport priority, for example. So that it's sort of a bit of a choice about how you best use the engagement. As I think, as Rupert said, I think sort of picking the things that like to have the most impact is a good approach. But I think everything's been said about funding is sort of accurate. So I haven't felt the need to sort of intervene. But I'm obviously quite happy to if there's anything that anybody wants to clarify, happy to do so.
Sorry, my question sort of relates back a bit more to the comms side of things, and I just wanted to understand whether there's engagement with utilities, and indeed whether there is a possibility of, shall we say, encouraging better performance from certain utilities in our area.
Yeah, thank you. So, as well as being Chief Officer for this, I'm also a Corporate Director for East Sussex County Council, and I feel exactly the same pain that you're feeling with utility companies, and I'm sure it's replicated. I suppose for Transport for the South East, we will support our local transport authority colleagues. So if they are saying things like, actually, there's a regional piece of work on this, then we can get behind it. Or there's some evidence that they need. But I have to say it's mainly operational challenges. And it's mainly making sure that when a utility company closes a road for an emergency, which they can do, you want to make sure that they're actually doing something and not closing the road and then turning up a week later to do whatever it is they've got to do. So I absolutely understand it. I think who I would point you to help get a really get some weight behind it, and from a national perspective as well, is the Association of Directors of Economy, Environment, Planning and Transport, the ADEPT family. So that is the local authority membership organisation for me and my equivalents, and they have weight. They have a highways group, an engineering group, for example, as well as regional boards who can really add weight to exactly that utility debate. So that's probably the direction I would go to rather than use Transport for the South East.
Anything else? Anything else with Dan? Thank you, colleagues. So just moving on now, we dealt with the final item a bit earlier, so we're now on to any other business. I've only got the one item. I don't know if anyone else has got any other business they want to raise. So just wanted to highlight to everybody that today the Head of Strategy, Mark Vallerly, is his last meeting with us today, so I think Rupert would like to say a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So it is Mark's last board meeting. Mark, many of you know Mark over the years. Mark worked with London boroughs. I also know, I think it was London councils. He had some time with Frank and has been in the transport planning world for quite a few years. Mark also used to be a university lecturer, he hates me telling people this, at the University of Westminster on transport planning related matters. So Mark has been in the sector, in the industry for many, many years, and specifically got involved in Transport for the South East in around 2016. This is not before delivering some complicated issues. So anybody who's delivered a parking scheme in a town where you've gone to civil parking enforcement knows it's a complicated business. I had to fight off the local journalist from a particular location who consistently wanted to take Mark out for dinner. I don't quite know what he'd done, but as good effort in terms of getting a parking scheme in and winning friends and influencing people. So if I turn my mind back to 2016, this was the government's first attempt at devolution in the South East. And there were a number of calls to see whether local authorities would come together on a devolution footprint. Mark was quite heavily involved with that and trying to help make the case around the infrastructure piece for devolution. That was specifically for the Sussex and Brighton, Sussex and Brighton or Sussex and Surrey? Sussex and Surrey area. At that time, the government couldn't be convinced to support devolution in the South East because at the time they wanted a directly elected mayor, how things change. And the politicians at the time said, look, we see what's happening in the north with Transport for the North. We want to do something like that here. And Transport for the South East was effectively born out of the politicians' desire to speak collaboratively with a single voice. Mark was instrumental in putting that together, and instrumental in those first early board meetings where local authorities were coming together, finding and navigating a path. Building the first transport strategy was down to Mark's relentless drive and commitment to ensuring that subnational transport bodies were a success. It is with sadness that he retires because it will leave a void that is irreplaceable. But I'm sure, like me, you wish Mark well when he retires next month. And I personally am very grateful to the support that Mark has given me over the years and grateful to the support he's given this board.
Yeah, thank you very much. I had my own comments. Thank you so much, Mark, and I'm sure everyone on the board will want to give you best wishes for your retirement. Thank you very much. Anything else on AOB for anyone? No. Our next meeting is on the 19th of October. Thank you very much for your indulgence this afternoon and for putting up with my first proper chairing of this meeting. I'll see you next time. Thank you.